The right arm of the free world, FN FAL is a Cold War legend used by over 90 nations worldwide. Developed in the early years of the conflict, this tried and tested battle rifle served those that opposed the spread of communism valiantly, but its time as the standard firearm for most NATO nations would come to a swift end. As ubiquitous and recognizable as the other great rifles of the era, such as the G3 and M16, this Belgian battle rifle design is one of the most prolific firearms in history. Weighing in at a little under 9.5 pounds and measuring 43 inches long, this 7.62 by 51mm NATO chambered battle rifle dispenses its ammunition at a rate of 650 to 700 rounds per minute. Firing out of 20 or 30 round box magazines, the FAL is effective at up to 600 meters, with rounds traveling at 840 meters per second. Founded in 1889, Fabrique Nationale, or FN have produced some of the most iconic firearms of all time, thanks in no small part to legendary firearms designer and FN's chief weapon designer, John Moses Browning. Beginning life manufacturing Mauser Model 1889 rifles for the Belgian government, the new company would begin a long-lasting relationship with Browning in 1897 to produce firearms, but FN would also be notable for its manufacturing of vehicles for sale in Belgium. In 1921, Browning began development on what is now known as the Browning high-power handgun, alongside his assistant FN and Saive, but this design would be his last, Browning passing away at his workbench in 1926 from heart failure. Saive would take on the responsibility of FN's chief weapons designer and completed Browning's final design in 1935, also overseeing the commercial manufacture of the Browning automatic rifle and improving the operating mechanism on the M1919 Browning machine gun. He continued to develop and produce firearms for FN, mainly focusing on his own design for a gas-operated semi-automatic rifle, but in May of 1940, Germany invaded Belgium, forcing Saive and his assistants to take all their drawings and plans for the new rifle with them as they fled across France, Spain, and into Portugal, where they escaped to England. After the war, Saive, who had been sporadically designing the new rifle, returned to his work on it at FN's headquarters, and by 1946, the weapon was starting to take shape, the first prototype model being built that year, chambered for the 7.92 by 33mm Kurz cartridge, the same used in the STG-44. In 1948, the British Army tested Saive's prototype, urging him and FN to build more of them, chambered in Britain's new intermediate cartridge, the 7x43mm cartridge, and to experiment with a bullpup design, but after building a few, FN dropped the bullpup idea. At this time, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, had recently been formed, and was seeking to standardize its weapons and ammunition, the various member nations submitting a number of different firearm and ammunition designs for consideration. The British and Belgians pushed for the use of the intermediate aforementioned 7x43mm cartridge, the British utilizing it in their bullpup EM2 design, and the Belgians in an early model of what would become the FAL, and the British presented them to the US in 1950 to test and compare them to the American T25 design, chambered in the .30 light rifle cartridge. Taking place at the Aberdeen Proving Grounds in Maryland, the Americans viewed the 7x43mm cartridge as underpowered, while the British viewed the American cartridge as too powerful for sustained, accurate automatic fire, the matter being settled with Winston Churchill's election in 1951, him overturning the decision to adopt the EM2 and 7x43mm cartridge, siding with the Americans in order to get a standardized NATO cartridge finalized. Following the tests, the Americans suggested that FN rechamber their rifle for the same cartridge as their design, FN doing so and putting forth a rechambered FAL known as the T48 for testing against the American T44. In 1953, the Fusil Automatic Léger design from FN, now chambered in the soon-to-be standardized 7.62x51mm cartridge, was adopted by the British and Commonwealth nations as the L1A1 rifle, the British hoping that the Americans would also adopt the weapon after acquiescing to their demands for the 7.62 round to be made the NATO standard cartridge. Ultimately, however, the T44 would beat out the T48 for the Americans, their design being lighter, simpler, and supposedly producible on the same machinery as the M1 Garand, though this would turn out to be false, and was adopted as the M14 in 1957, killing the dream of a NATO standard weapon. Nonetheless, the FAL became widely adopted among not just NATO member nations, but all across the globe, becoming the Western equivalent of the Warsaw Pact's Kalashnikov rifles. Since entering production in 1953, countless variants of the FAL have been developed, but there are three main variants of FN's original design. The FAL 50.00 is the original model of the FAL, having a fixed buttstock and standard barrel, the stock initially being made from wood, but having since been replaced with a synthetic design instead. The FAL 50.41, also known as the FAL-O, is a squad automatic weapon designed to complement the FAL, having a heavier barrel, a shortened handguard, and a bipod. The FAL 50-60 series, those being the 50-61, 50-62, 50-63, and 50-64, are folding stock variants of the FAL, created primarily for paratroopers, having various modifications depending on the variant, such as shorter barrels, folding charging handles, or new lower receivers. There exist a number of licensed copies of the FAL, Austria's Sturmgewehr 58 and American DSA SA-58 to name a few, along with dozens of variants adopted by militaries across the globe, such as Brazil's Imbel M964, South African R1, and Israeli Romat M1953. Civilians have access to the majority of the FAL variants, albeit all designed to be semi-automatic only and not convertible to fully automatic fire. Still in service to this day, the FN FAL became affectionately known as the right arm of the free world, some 7 million rifles being produced since 1953, and despite FN stopping production in the 1980s, the iconic rifle is still being produced under license across the globe. Unfortunately, with the American selection of the M14 over the FAL, the concept of the NATO standard rifle was largely abandoned as the Cold War progressed, many of the nations first adopting the weapon, replacing it by the 1980s. Britain would replace the FAL with the SA-80 design in the mid-1980s, being a development on their EM2 design discussed previously, Australia replacing the FAL with Steyer's AUG, and Canada replacing it with the American AR-15. Despite not completely filling the role it was designed for, the FN FAL's time in service has been extensive, finding use in conflicts on every continent, the rifle being so widespread that during the Falklands War in 1982, the British and Argentine armies found themselves fighting against each other with the same basic design. The FAL has been well liked by the nations that have chosen and continue to choose to use it, though many have switched to a semi-automatic only variant of the rifle, it often being uncontrollable in fully automatic fire. It truly was a transitional design, being, if not a great rifle, an excellent time capsule of firearms design, being one of the most important stepping stones from the wooden bolt-action weapons that preceded it to the full metal automatics that would largely replace it. The rifle built for universal use, and coming close to that goal, the FN FAL is one of the most iconic battle rifle designs ever produced, and is a truly brilliant weapon, remaining in service despite over 70 years passing since it was first produced. Thank you so very much for watching these videos. Please like and subscribe and comment below what you'd like to see me cover next.